What are you doing? Like, you've been in Montreal for a while now, hey? Are you from there?
No, I'm from Nelson, British Columbia.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been here since, oh boy, see, again, I'm bad with dates. I've been here since 2004, I think. Something like that, around there. Yeah. I've
Mhm.
been here for a while. Like I'm here, like I moved here to live here. I didn't move here to go to school or move here to like I
Okay.
moved here with the intention of like settling down as much as a composer can settle down.
Right.
You know, to create a home and then, find the community here. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you still liking it?
I am. I mean, it's kind of a funny time to answer that question
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm still liking this room. Like I feel a bit disconnected with the city just because I'm not really out in it. But yeah, no, I mean, I have no intention of leaving.
I noticed you had you posted a Facebook status at one point. No, I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Um oh, I wish I could find it. Am I gonna find it right now? I
Well,
don't.
if you remind me what it was regarding, I might remember.
You asked a question to composers.
Oh, right.
That was really interesting. I remember kind of following along. Hello, composers, colleagues, and friends, both emerging and established. That was important too. What are your main concerns, questions, areas, both creative and professional, in the process of composition where you feel a lack of knowledge and support? Yeah,
Hmm.
that was on March 9th. I found it interesting and awesome how many people responded to that. And I mean, I'm not a composer, but I still found it very useful to kind of like follow along to what people were saying.
Yeah, no, I always felt like there was a real lack of. I don't mean this as a dig to like composers. I mean, I'm a composer, but I just feel like I've always wanted more of a sense of community
Mm,
as a composer, more of a sense of solidarity. I think there's tons of great people and colleagues and mentors, mentees. There's lots of great stuff already happening. And when I meet composers and we take that time to get to know each other, it's really changes everything. But I recognize that not everyone has the easiest time reaching out and talking to people. And it's not very structured, the composer lifestyle. It's really what you make of it. And obviously, going to school to learn to be a composer, you don't learn about the vast majority of what you have to encounter. I mean, this is really true probably of most things that we learn how to do, like a skill, a craft, and then we go out into the world and all the stuff related to the communications around it and how to, properly deal with people, deal with your own self, your own emotions, your own boundaries, um, ethics, you know, just any kind of moral, emotional, political issue that you're going to encounter. I think this is like a lot on people's minds. And I feel like there's a real lack of support. So it was prompted, I should specify, because the CLC asked me if I wanted to do a webinar for, they offered a bunch of webinars as part of their Pivot series, which is that mentor mentee pairing that they do.
okay.
And so and it was kind of, at first it was open-ended, was what I wanted to do. Like, do you want to just speak about, being a professional composer and, something like that. But they were very open to what I wanted to do. And when I received that email, my first reaction was, I have no knowledge. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
Like, which is one of the things that a colleague mentioned in the comments of that thread, was that there's heavy imposter syndrome. I just think when you choose to do something in your life where it's not like, I'm going to be, a kindergarten teacher, or, where there's a certain like clear model of what that's supposed to look like. I'm not saying that's easy at all. It's definitely not. I'm just saying, I think there are some jobs where it's a bit clearer, the skills that you need to work on and sort of the expectations of it. And I think
Mhm.
the creative world is pretty vast, and I think a lot of people feel quite lost, and all points of their careers. Certainly, tons of people coming out of university are like, now what, and they feel very unguided and very unsupported. And then, people emerging to mid-career composers like myself, and even established composers, I think we get older, we get more confident about certain things just through experience, but I think there's a lack of communication. And I think people were expected to be really, artists are supposed to have assertive with their ideas and be fierce, and there's this real competition sort of embedded into how you make it as a composer. You apply for contests, you apply for grants, you apply for, and all those things are fantastic, but I think it really doesn't encourage lifting other people up as much as it should.
Almost like people are seeing others as their competition more than people that they can work with and support.
Yeah, I think you have to really, I think it depends on personality, and I think it depends on who you are and how you feel about yourself. But, I would like to think that I'm someone that doesn't automatically look at people as my competition, but I feel like there's something, you want, if we all want to survive, we all want to feel loved. These are really basic things. And so how that gets translated into in how you try to survive, financially in your career can be quite influenced, I think, by how it's structured and how the finances and support and visibility is structured, right? And I know that I consciously make an effort to practice being open-minded about composers who are, maybe I don't really understand their aesthetic, but I see that they're working really hard. Or, people reach out to you and I reach out to people. I think it's really, really important to continue throughout all stages of your career to help other people and to ask for help. I think there's a real solitary tendency in the creative process to, outside of collaborations, but in your own work, to kind of self-protect and shell up, and it's exhausting. It's really exhausting.
Well, I think there's also sort of a trope with composition specifically being like a very solitary activity. Do you find?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of this stereotype.
Oh, for sure. I mean, no, I mean, yeah, of course. The whole, I'm gonna go live in the woods and write this piece and be a mystery, and we people. I mean, I get it. I mean, I like alone time, and I need alone time to think, and I like having solitary time. Really, I think it is important, but I think we're social creatures, and I just think it's specifically important not just to be social as composers, but to be social with each other. Mm-hmm. We're not geniuses that live in, I'm certainly not, but even people I think are amazing and I really look up to, they're part of a community. They're part of a geographic and cultural and musical community. They have, everyone's really unique, and everyone can create their own unique voices, but I'm really pro recognizing all the overlaps, because I think there's just a real expectation to be so different as a composer that it doesn't really encourage sharing of ideas. You hear these stories about young composers in university, and people don't want to share scores. And I just find that and as I'm saying this, I'm realizing someone asked me to send them a score and I've still forgotten to send it. But that's just forgetting. But I just, that kind of tendency of I get it. I'm not gonna, if random people I don't know at all want me to send them all my scores, I'm not gonna do that. My scores have a lot of emotional weight and value to me, and I think there needs to be a more meaningful exchange to share that kind of stuff. But that tendency is a tendency that I kind of keep my eye on, and I keep my eye on I just think it's important to just be aware of it, and everyone's gonna have a different relationship with it. But I know personally it makes me feel better as a person, and if I try to open up more and be more vulnerable, both in the creative process, both in how I compose and my ideas, but also just with people, otherwise it just becomes too much about ego. I've talked to a composer who is one of my principal role models, who was just starting a piece, and we were composing side by side, and he said, I have no idea what I'm doing. He said something to the effect of like, I feel like every time I start a piece, I'm like learning how to compose for the first time.
Mm.
And it was like this mix of total modesty, vulnerability, and also just, I found it just really inspiring to feel like you can, because like it would be very boring to like create in your life and then feel like you're like you're so good at it, you can just call it in. Like, what is that even? Like, that's not even creating to me anymore. Like that just, this is where like trying to find that balance of how to challenge yourself and take risks and do things that are new to you, not because they're like groundbreaking new things that no one's ever done, but new to you. This has to be new to you. And I think honest, vulnerable, you know, and I just feel like there needs to be this kind of vigorous points of reflection and time away, I think, from the craft throughout someone's lifetime. This is just my feeling about it, so that you can always feel kind of new and young to it. Mm-hmm. I know I've met composers who are like maybe not so upfront about it, but demonstrate like tons of like confidence, and not in a good way, like where they're just like, yeah, like, and it shows. To me, it really shows in one's music. I find it really interesting when composers have like really not great pieces at certain points in their life, and then very beautiful. Like, I really like diverse output. I like it when people who create demonstrate through what they create that they're constantly questioning.
Yeah, that I think that beginner mind is really important in all aspects of life. I don't know if that's exactly what you were speaking about, but I think it's very connected. Just to kind of always, even if it's something that you know you're a composer and you know that you have experience and all of that, but still approaching it with the mind of someone who can see new things there, right?
Yeah, I think what it is like remaining curious. Mm-hmm. Just, I think when I meet people I really admire who are just like have this kind of childlike curiosity.
Yeah, exactly.
I find that really inspiring. I think like a really pivotal moment for me, like this, what year was it? I don't know, like a handful of years ago, my husband and I went to France. I forget, I'm so bad at dates. Anyways, we stopped in Avignon and we visited with his old prof back when he was in the electroacoustic program at Université de Montreal, and he studied with Francis Thomas, who's like the guy, and he lives there now. And I was meeting him, and he was him and his wife were really gracious hosts. And he had this thing that they were gifted. Walking on the beach, they met somebody, and it was like this beautiful kind of gray dyed rice paper sheet that was tautly like pulled between like a frame, and in it was like really fine black sand. And he wanted to show us, or I forget if it was him or his wife, but at one point he took it and he's like, oh, and he was describing, I forget exactly what he said, so I'm not going to try to quote, but he was describing like how the sound sounds like this, and he was trying to, how it sounds exactly like waves crashing, like really, like you close your eyes, it really sounds like waves crashing. So we closed our eyes and he gave this like little mini performance of like moving it. And it was just like this kind of like small magical moment. And he's like electroacoustic royalty and has this big studio, and like he's like a historical person, and he didn't want to look at his gear, he didn't want to like talk about his new work, he just really wanted to like explore this object with us. And I remember just being so tickled by it, and just enjoying like that kind of relationship, that you could be like at this kind of like, I don't know, not the end, but like at the later part of your career and really established, and just so keen to like play around with an object to make beautiful sound and talk about the story about it. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah,
those kind of people are very charming, very, very magnetic.
It's that curiosity, like this really positive curiosity to create experiences and sounds that you haven't quite heard. And of course they're inspired by moments that you have heard and experiences that you have had, but they're like wanting to like tap into like that kind of moment you felt and just kind of sit there for a bit and open it up and go further into it. I think those are really like really basic but really important instincts that no matter what happens and who you are in your life, you have to come back to that. Otherwise, it's easy to get lost. I mean, that's just my subjective but strong opinion about it.
Yeah. So how have you been composing during this time? Like, have you been composing much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been.
Why are you laughing?
Because I shouldn't laugh. It's great. I'm just like, it's all I do. It's like, all
okay.
I do.
Nice.
Yeah. If anything, I'm trying to structure and find. So how have I been composing?
Yeah. What does it look like for you right now?
Sorry. I composed on the floor. This is the thing that people who are close to me know about me. I don't know what it is. I think when I was a teenager and I'd have like something I was like in, often like a big deadline for a project or studying for a test, I like to see everything at the same time. And so I display everything out on my floor. Also, I think it's because I didn't have a desk when I was a kid.
Okay.
Dig at my parents. No. But I had my stuff all over the floor. And it's funny because I have a big desk here and I have piano with like that I can close, and then just a big surface, and there's table and there's, and I'm still like often like if I'm doing emails and administrative stuff and other things, I'm here. But if like when I'm actually mapping things out, I'm on the floor. And then when I'm kind of stepping back and trying to organize my thoughts, moving around post-its or doing whatever I do, I hang things on the wall often. Make weird sounds with my voice and like I'm like shh. Yeah. Oh no, 5 seconds later. Yeah.
That's great. It's like a police investigation. Just like,
oh yeah, the thread. No. Yeah. No, I mean, I've taken some pictures and exposed it. There's some ones that look a little bit more like, or like I have random text that they say things like, don't do that, Keiko. Don't do it bigger and more heart and a big chukka. Like I'll just write like random things and I'm like, maybe I'm not gonna take a picture of that. I mean, I should be more transparent, but there's I have like my own kind of weird language that's like reminding myself, like take a risk here, and like, this is gonna be boring, add something, no, undo. Like I just like kind of write. Actually, when I'm inputting my scores into Sibelius, sometimes I'll like notice something that's like where I'm questioning it, but I'm like too tired. I'm like, I need to come back to this. And so I'll be like, come back here, and I'll put like, really big font with like full caps so that I won't miss it in the last run of editing. And then sometimes if I'm like deliriously tired, I'll just be like, ah, and I'll write like A-H-H-H-H-H, and just like it's this joke. And then like, and the next morning I'll delete it. And I was doing like a reorchestration. Oh yeah, because I lost an orchestral score. I had an orchestral score programmed for the Kamloops Symphony, and the file got corrupted. And so I thought I just had to update and like reorchestrate a couple things in the percussion section, but I had to, from the physical score to my computer in a really short period of time, re-input it all. And I was like deliriously tired, and I wrote, and I didn't catch all my ahs. And at one point in rehearsal, I think it was a violist. Yeah, it was a violist. Came up to me and really kindly was like, do you want me to shout ah?
That's so
They're like, I don't think you want that. I just, based on your aesthetic, like I'm not a very theatrical, humorous composer, but they were so professional. They just wanted to check that I didn't want them to verbalize it. And it was not even like it wasn't like where you would put text for someone to like sing or speak. It was just like in the margins, like this is this really big. That's really funny. It was really cute.
You must have burst out laughing.
Yeah, no, I was so embarrassed. I get not obsessive, but I go down like these big rabbit holes of like, oh, cool. I didn't know that they had subtones on this instrument. Oh, and then I'm like on some nerdy website, and then it's like 3 hours later, and I'm like, then I don't even end up using the technique. So it's like I definitely have to like have this kind of organized, more administrative headspace perspective. I think I really like composing in the evening, and I really like composing even sometimes late.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just kicks in. It just like kicks in on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not great for my body, but I don't really know how to train myself to feel inspired at different times in the day.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. That people are definitely different that way. I think I'm definitely more like you, especially when I was younger. Like I would, well, I used to write a lot, like just, I don't know, poetry or prose or whatever. And, or even just practicing, honestly, like that's when I sort of come back online at like 8 p.m.
Because I think what night feels like is like people are having dinner, they're doing their own thing. Like I have this, and there's this not this expectation that if someone sends me an email that I should see it within 5
Mm-hmm.
hours. Like I know I don't have to open up my computer tomorrow morning. I can just like, and then you feel more like you're creating for yourself. You're creating for the idea. It no longer becomes about like delivering something. You know, like you get out of that kind of headspace.
Yeah, totally. Never thought of it that way. It's also kind of like an intimate time because yeah, everyone's at home with their families or like inside, and things are generally quieter at night and less traffic, and it's just, yeah, it's more insular in a way.
I think for me, like I'm starting to learn more of like what slows me down and what doesn't. And so I have a really hard time just completely launch, unless I get up really early, but completely launching into composition and ignoring everything. So I tend to kind of like, I've been trying to do like a block of creative work before I've even let the day touch me. And then I jump in, I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, you know, I have to like do social courage, Keiko, and then I open things up and dust off. I'm like, okay, what are the really important emails I need to respond to, deal with? Okay, make a note of that, la, la, la. And then I come back into it in the evening. So it's like, I have to kind of, I think what it is it's controlling your boundaries and your time. So it's like being proactive about when you're going to make that kind of energy work for you, as opposed to reactive. So before I would be composing and then I'd hear a ding. I mean, that's like the worst example, but like, or I would just be procrastinating from composing and I'd come over and I'd like update my email feed or social media feed. And then I'm like, what? They didn't get that? I'm like, oh, and then I call them and I'm sending something and then I'm checking something, or, you know, even positive things, like someone wants to like commission me or something. And I'm like thinking about my agenda and then I'm like looking up the ensemble and then I'm listening to excerpts. And then it's just like, I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people still do that. And I certainly do sometimes too. Like you don't set your day with intentions. One thing that I've been doing, I don't do it all the time. I do it when I'm having a harder time, is like when I make a to-do list, I will like list how I feel, like an emotion next to each thing. Oh, even if it just seems kind of like obvious or banal, like I'll be like stressed because it's a big project and I feel lost, like stressed, lost, stressful email. I would be like anxiety, fear, you know, just like shame, blah, blah, blah. Like I just try to, and then maybe something I need to input something and I need to double check editing, you know, like bored, like I just kind of, you know, like you just kind of like, because then you can recognize it. And I think half of the battle is just recognizing your relationship with all your actions, because then you can like go in with more self-awareness. I think the pandemic really helped me to like have a lot of time for myself and to really reflect on how much time I really want, if possible, you know, just like logistically, you know, paying the bills and having food, for each project and what kind of projects I want to work on. It's a real luxury to be able to like answer those questions, but you know, like I don't, I think sometimes it's easy without even knowing it to equate success with the amount of attention you're getting, of course, but also just possible commissions, things you've won. And it's understandable why people would equate that. But I think it's just important at some point to be like, okay, like why am I composing? Like why am I doing what I'm doing? Like why am I really doing it? And what are the things, the fundamental things I need to be happy and to like survive in life? It's a big part of my personality to be like, oh, I never thought about writing something like that, but that sounds interesting. Let me do it. I'm like, oh, I'm so touched that you thought of me. Of course I'll do it. And so I find myself just feeling so humbled and honored with these opportunities. And I still feel humbled and honored, but I'm starting to be like, okay, like my time is valuable. and I am valuable as a person, and taking care of myself is valuable. So I need to start creating this balance. It doesn't mean that I'm not grateful or I don't respect, but it's just like, not now, later, not this, that, or like, you know, or like, I like that project, but I don't like this program, or just really having that determination to kind of like make what you're doing seem more and more coherent with who you are. It's a really hard thing to do, because it's really hard just to live as a composer. And so a lot of the hustle is just like, every composer goes through this huge hustle period of just like, yeah, okay, working really hard and getting things done. And it's super admirable and I really respect it. But it's really easy, I think, to get like, I think it's really easy to get like, to drown and get lost in that. Reading books, volunteering somewhere, learning a new craft, spending more time outside. And I don't just mean this in this foofy, like, take, you know, like, because be well-rounded. Like, I think I'm still kind of a passionate person, and I spend a lot of time in my head thinking and loving and, you know, just like wanting to express things. But, you know, I think our output becomes stale when you're not engaged in life. I think it's important somewhere in the year, somewhere every 6 months, somewhere in there, for you to have this space of nothingness. And I know reflection, having space for reflection, is a really privileged sort of thing, but I think it can happen when you're doing dishes. It can happen when you're doing other jobs. It can happen, you know, to pay the rent. It can happen in all different sorts of ways, and not just like, you know, the rich composer out in his garden or their garden. You know, like, I think it can happen in doing tasks where you're, you know, that are just a little bit less like mind absorbing. Not having
that intensity, that laser focus on one direction.
Yeah, it's like this focus on output, I think, and you need to receive. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I would consider it like the listening side of the composition process. There's not enough emphasis on the fact that we need to go and support other people and listen to their music. We need to take walks and listen to ambient sounds. We need to listen to our thoughts. We need to listen to our hearts. We need to listen to people on social media and in the news that are in trouble. Like, we need to listen in the biggest sense of it, having that space to receive.
Wow. Yeah. Totally. What's an example of something that you've sort of been obsessed with exploring in your work, that an aesthetic or a sound or a theme or anything like that?
Well, I mean, I've been writing a lot of pieces around the idea of memory, a little bit more specifically like echoic memory, so the memory of sound. And sort of actually a little bit weaving into how we were talking, like, we're not these creators that live in bubbles. We live in communities. We live with our own histories. We live, and recognizing that. So I just, a handful of years ago, I was asked to write a piece, sort of like interacting with Mozart in some way, and I was like, and I just felt kind of like, like a little annoyed, like, you know, like, there's all these kinds of commissions out there. It was like, please write a piece in homage to some old dead white guy. And I, you know, I love a bunch of old dead white guys, don't get me wrong, like, you know, but I mean, kind of, but anyways, I did not have a connection with Mozart in a way that I write music. I write music often from very personal starting points. And I was like really kind of having a hard time. And I came across that story that's in like probably in most of his biographies about how when he was young, him and his father went to the Sistine Chapel and they heard Miserere Medos by Gregorio Allegri. And then, you know, Mozart came there, heard it, and then went home or went to where they were staying and transcribed it by memory. Went back apparently one time to finish his transcription. And it made me like Mozart. It really softened me to him and made him much more three-dimensional as a person. And I was, because that piece is gorgeous. And I connect more to that piece and music from that period than I do necessarily an emotional level to Mozart. You know, Mozart has some pieces that I really connected with, but that I was less interested in this kind of historical, referential sound like Mozart, whatever. I don't know. Like and I thought, oh, it's so interesting. This is my very long-winded wind up to say, I thought it was so interesting that my interest in Mozart peaked about thinking about not what he was composing, but thinking about what he was moved by. I mean, I would only assume that if you immediately went home and transcribed something, it's because you were moved by it. I mean, there's no like written transcript that Mozart said X, Y, Z about this piece, but this is my inference from it, and it made me feel connected to him. And so then I started going in my mind on this thread of like, well, one, I wrote this piece for this quartet in Hanover, Germany, based on this idea. So it has like references and fragments of this piece, but both distorted through this kind of like abstraction representation of what the acoustics sound like in the Sistine Chapel and how it's an antiphonal choir, but also distorted in a very kind of, fictional way by how things get distorted in our head. So it's me kind of creating these like fragmentations of sound to represent like what does sound like when it's been like floating around in our head for a while, when we're looping it, when we've distorted because we've been trying to remember it for so long. So it's just like, so I started thinking about it like that, one, because it leans into this idea of that when we express and compose something that is not coming out of thin air, it's coming from our memory, it's coming from our experiences, and they're highly distorted experiences, but these memories, these emotions, these echoic sounds, these things that we understand that we can audiate, imagine audio in our head. So I became really interested in memory of sound and the imagination of sound because they're very linked. We have memories and then we imagine. So like one is like a creative inner process and one is, an experience. And I had a thread of like being interested in like very broadly emergence, but that's very broad. So more specifically like auto-organization, like flocking behavior of birds, fish, so schooling, and but my math is not that advanced, and I was like reading these totally way beyond me, like science articles talking about the algorithms and this and this, and I'm not Znaka, so I didn't want to like input things and create complex, really indecipherable kind of representations of these patterns. But what I ended up doing was like reading like more just like accessible science books that described how these animals or birds or insects behaved. And then I would use those descriptions to create rules for the orchestra or the string quartet. And then I would designate. And so there's like tons of like more of an impressionistic kind of humanist intervention in it. But that was my other thread. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's tons of composers who are interested in like natural phenomenon. I'm not really interested in trying to capture or be mimetic about the sounds. I'm more interested in actual the rhythmic behavior and dynamic behavior of them and how that could create micro and macro structures and pieces with large ensembles. Yeah.
So cool. I think that one of the wonderful things that I've noticed about doing this is like a lot of it is somewhat for me because I really enjoy just catching up with people that I don't see a lot and having discussions like this. I mean, where it's like, let's designate this time to talk about art and music and creativity and the stuff of life, and let's designate this time to do that. And it's been so wonderful to kind of like reconnect with people and in some cases meet new people. So that's been really valuable. I feel like I'm nurturing my artistic side just by having these discussions. So
yeah, I mean, I mean, this is a community. I mean, you're creating a community, making podcasts, having conversations.
Yeah.
Well, it's so nice to talk to you.
It's so nice to talk to you. Yeah, it's so nice to catch up. I'm hoping to spend some time in Montreal this summer if COVID allows. So I'll certainly let you know if I'm there.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Okay. Thank you.